Well, while we're looking at symbols and signs and wonders in Exodus, I thought we would do another classic, so to speak, the Red Sea crossing. And as as we know, just a little background again on the story. The Hebrews had been enslaved in Egypt for many years. Okay, and then last week we heard Moses was, well, Moses was raised in Egypt, okay, but until adulthood, but he escaped back to his homeland when it was discovered that truly he was a Hebrew by blood. And so he had been living back in Midian was his home territory. He was called by God to go back to Egypt and bring the Hebrews out of Egypt. Pardon me. Now, where we're going tonight, okay. Uh, Moses, of course, had a relationship, so to speak, with the Egyptians and the king and the Pharaoh. And so he went back to Egypt and he finally got it um, worked out with the Pharaoh that the Hebrews could leave.
Power off.
And then, of course, what happened is once they realized the Hebrews were leaving, um, and what they had contributed, they didn't want them to leave. So the Egyptians, as we'll see tonight, came after the Hebrews. Initially, they were not going to do that, but they changed their mind. So I think I got George here. Yes, I do.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll tell you what, this is chapter 14, and I just thought we would read the story with the scriptures, and then talk about this Red Sea thing a little bit. I wanted to clarify one thing though, and you'll see this throughout the first 5 books, which is Moses, okay? And you will see that everything starts with the Lord spoke to Moses. Now, but what we need to pardon me, I don't know what's going on. Okay, but we need to understand when you see this, okay, all right, Moses did receive his guidance from God and through visions, but in his case, they say, okay, um, God spoke directly to Moses and there were no symbols. Because remember, normally with the prophets and whoever, when they spoke, when they communicated, when God communicated with the prophets, it involved symbols. But Moses, no, there was no symbols. And really what he received is something that spiritualists call clear audience. In other words, you can just clearly hear um, spirit from the other side. Uh, and that's how he did. But we got to remember here. All right, all these stories in the Bible originally they were verbal or they happened, okay, and they were transcribed later. So when they were transcribed, it was always by a Semitic man, Hebrew, probably in this uh, instance and whatnot. But you have to remember the belief at the time was that God was responsible for everything good and bad. So when the scribe is writing the story, that's how he's going to relate it. That all of this that Moses did, including the laws that required stoning and stuff like that, um, the writer is going to say God spoke to Moses and told him to do it. So, um, and this is something that had always been very confusing to me. But if you keep in mind the belief system, and that belief system was also that of the person writing the story down, then we can get around the fact that much of the stuff, a lot of the stuff that Moses did was not desirable to God, but that's the way it was interpreted. So keep that in mind because you will see it throughout, uh, throughout the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. Okay, here we go. All right, George is going to read us scriptures.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel that they turn back and encamp by the inlet of Caritha between Migdal and the sea in front of Baal Zephon. Opposite it shall you encamp by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, They are strangers in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. And the Lord said to Moses, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. And I will triumph over Pharaoh and over all his army, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. And they did so. And it was told the king of Egypt that the people had gone away, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants changed against the people. And they say, What have we done that we have let Israel go from serving us? And he made ready his chariots and took his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots and all chariots of the Egyptians and warriors over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel. But the children of Israel had gone out victoriously. And the Egyptians pursued after them all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamping by the inlet of Caritha before Baal Zephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes and saw the Egyptians marching after them, and they were terribly afraid. And the children of Israel prayed before the Lord.
Okay, just a couple of things here. When you see, and they will say this a lot, that the Pharaoh's heart was hardened, again, it's attributed to God, but Pharaoh's heart was hardened by his own faults, pride, and greed. God's justice and majesty were to triumph over human pride and power.
And they,
Okay, I left, excuse me, George.
I'm sorry.
I left this in here just to give you an idea of the the Hebrews and um their status here after coming out from Egypt, where they were seemingly enslaved for many years, but they really didn't have it that bad. So go ahead, George.
And they said to Moses, Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt thus with us and brought us out of Egypt? Is it not this word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in this wilderness. And Moses said to the people, fear not, wait and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will perform for you today. For the Egyptians who you have seen today, you shall see them again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And the Lord said to Moses, why do you pray before me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward.
Okay, and should you want to really read the book of Exodus, what you will see, and this is kind of in defense of Moses. Um, Moses had a very difficult time with these people because they really did have it good in Egypt. And so you'll see throughout the book of Exodus, um, Moses had to deal with the behavior of these people.
And as for you, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the sea. And behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall follow them. And I will triumph over Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots, and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I have been triumphant over Pharaoh, over all his army, his chariots, and his horsemen. And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. And the pillar of a cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. And it came between the army of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel, and it was cloudy and dark all the night. But it gave light all the night to the children of Israel, so that they could not draw near one another to all the night. And Moses lifted up his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground, and the waters were like a wall to them on the right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went into the sea after them, and all of Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen.
Okay, so now let's look at some of these things. Okay. I put these verses here. We had looked at these last week, but okay, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them on the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night never failed to go before the people. Okay, now here's the background on this. And of course, it says we this is kind of this whole thing is viewed as a miracle, so to speak. And so they say, okay, you know, uh God moves the clouds and God, but here's the background on that. Okay, and remember, this is desert. All right. And if you ever seen clouds in the desert, it's almost like they're right on the right there on the ground. So Near Eastern shepherds and desert experts know the movement of clouds and their direction because there was no many people got lost in the desert uh, because I mean there was no roads. The sand would cover up any tracks or roads. So, but the shepherds and Moses himself were familiar with the clouds and their direction, how they so, and of course they knew the movement of the stars too. All right, and that was the clouds, and what is believed that they saw in the night that helped to guide them. Oil experts in Arabia believe that what the Israelites saw was the glow from the burning oil ignited by heat. In some parts of Arabia where oil is abundant, fires are seen during the night. So again, it says that the Lord went before them, and that, that coincides with the belief. But we'll talk a little bit more. Okay. Now, here's the thing about this Red Sea crossing. Scholars have shown clearly that Moses and the Hebrews did not actually cross the Red Sea. Okay, they crossed the isthmus between the Gulf of Suez and the shoals of the Bitter Lakes. And prior to the construction of the Suez Canal, I'll show you in a map here in just a minute. The Bitter Lakes were connected with the Gulf by high tides. Pharaoh thought that the Hebrews, being a pastoral people and strangers in that region, would not understand the tides and would therefore try to cross the isthmus. But Moses, okay, being a shepherd and a scientist, knew when the tides were high or low. That is why he was guided southward instead of northward, where the crossing was easier. Now, let's look at the okay. Let's look at these maps. All right. um, here is the basis. Oops, sorry about that. Here's the basis of hold on. Okay. Um, all right. Down here, let's because the slide is taking up. All right, this body of water that you see down here, okay, that is the Red Sea. All right, and so the theory is that the Red Sea could not have okay, the Red Sea could not have been parted enough so that there would be dry ground for the Hebrews to cross. Okay, and that's based on the fact that the Red Sea was deep, very deep. Okay, and so, but tradition still says that Moses crossed the Red Sea. All right, but here the Hebrews were in Egypt in Goshen. Okay, that's where they had lived and for many years. All right, and so when they first when the Pharaoh said, okay, you can go, and when they first left, they were going to go this way. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but they were going to go north up this way to what this isn't my map totally. So up to the promised land. Well, they didn't do that because this land was really part of the Philistines. The Philistines were very nasty warriors. All right, and in addition, the Egyptians could have overcome the Hebrews easily had they gone this route. So, and they had camped intending to go that way, but the Egyptians changed their mind and they were going to come after them. So God told we read that in the first verse. God told them to back up and to go further south. Okay, so I just put on here just a little bit just to understand that it wasn't the Red Sea down here. Okay, up here, and you see it mentioned in the story that the inlet of Caritha. So they at that point in time they had something called the Bitter Lakes, which is now now you have the Suez Canal connecting the Mediterranean to the Gulf of Suez. Okay, and then you had the Gulf of Suez. You had this the tip of the Gulf of Suez, and I can't say that word, but the traditional will say it's Pi-hahiroth, and that is where they crossed. Now, because in here, and there should be a little line here. These were connected, but just through shoals, small bodies of water and whatnot. And so when when these were at high tide, in here they could not cross. There's no way. But Moses was guided once again to come down to here, okay? And he was guided to this place, and the story says he, lifted his hand or his staff, and the waters came up. But what it was is that they got there at low tide, and at low tide, this was seemingly dry land. Okay, but it was dry enough that the tide was low enough that they could get through. Okay, so that's kind of that's kind of the story. And I just thought I put this modern day map here so that you could tell up here the Gulf of Suez is the Gulf of Suez today. All right, but you have the Suez Canal connecting the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, which is down here. And back then they talked about the Gulf of Aqaba, and sometimes today it may, but actually the Gulf of Aqaba is the Persian Gulf. So I just put this map in here so I thought you might want to see. The Red Sea is here, all right, just like there, and this is now Saudi Arabia. The Promised Land, of course, is way up here. This tiny little area up here. You see Jerusalem, okay, and just in case you've been listening to the news and stuff, right there is little Qatar, okay. Now, but let's go on here. Let's go on.
And it came to pass that in the morning Watch, the Lord appeared to the Egyptian army in a pillar of fire and of cloud, and threw the Egyptian army into confusion, thus clogging their chariot wheels that were drew heavily, so that the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from before the house of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against Egypt." And the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen." And Moses lifted up his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its place when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it. And the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not a single one of them. But the children of Israel walked through the sea as if they were walking on dry land, and the waters were like a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead upon the seashores.
Okay, end of story, but we went over the hardened heart. Now, okay, this is considered a miracle. Okay, traditionally, it's a miracle, and so, and it is accepted as a miracle that the waters did part, and it was Moses that parted the waters, and then Moses, because it's a story that's taken literally, and it does seem like a miracle. However, the real miracle, okay, is in this story and throughout all of but the real miracle here rests with the fact that it was God's guidance that got them to the right place at the right time. Moses and the Hebrews trusted in God, whereas the Egyptians trusted in their chariots and horses. They thought they could overtake the Israelites, but before they reached the eastern shore, the wind ceased and the tide came back swiftly, covering the Egyptians. So, but the fact is that in addition to Moses knowing that territory, God did guide him there, and to where to where they could cross, and to where the tides. You see, it was the tides. The tide was low, and that's what, God guided Moses to get him there exactly when the tide was going to be at low, and so that was the miracle. Okay. Now, when we're talking about this guidance and whatnot, again, this is the Old Testament, and this is this is in the Bible. It's before the Gospels. However, once again, now, what we have seen here with Moses is this concept, and I think maybe we might go back to the Gospels a little bit to learn more about this kingdom of heaven on earth. So, so really and truly, what we experienced there with Moses and is the kingdom. Okay, so in Aramaic, the word kingdom, Malkutha, means counsel or guidance. Okay, and when you see when you read the Gospels, you will see the kingdom of God and you will see the kingdom of heaven, both the same. Okay, and then Jesus taught that the kingdom, the counsel or guidance of God, heaven, is here now. Okay, it's here now. We don't have to wait to go to heaven to experience God's counsel or God's guidance. And according to Jesus, if we follow his teachings, Jesus' teachings, then we will have the counsel and the guidance as well as living uh, living in heaven or in God's kingdom now. So again, it's a great story. It's debated. It's debated, still being debated by scholars, and so and seemingly yes, it did happen, but that's the interpretation, the guidance, him being there at exact time and whatnot. That's the main point of this story, not that Moses abracadabra split the waters and all that. Okay. Appreciate your contributions. And once again, most of this came from this commentary. And thoughts, questions, comments.